So how far would you go to save a piece of equipment? Well, I guess the answer would depend upon how much it was worth, whether monetarily or if there was any sentimental value in it. But either way, how far is too far even when it comes to a high value item? Unfortunately, what you're about to see is neither of those situations, but does that mean it was a total waste of time? In today's video, we're going to be looking at this Craftsman leaf blower, and the problem is that in a different video, I stated that it was broken and not worth fixing. But after some time had passed and after working on a different machine, I started to realize that I may have jumped to conclusion. Now, this is not a complete repair video. In fact, this is a revisit of an older repair from years ago. So if you want to see the actual repair video, click on the link at the top of the screen. Otherwise, we're going to be talking about the time and more importantly, the money I put into trying to fix this blower, and if we have some time left, some of my other experiences as well. So in the other video, I ended up using an old compression tester that I've had for 15 or 20 years, and I wasn't sure how accurate it really was. Now, I didn't buy this new tester solely for this project, so I'm not going to include it into the cost. And besides that, I don't usually include the purchase of tools in the cost of a project because I consider them investments instead. So you don't have to buy an expensive tester. In fact, this one was a little more than $20. That means finding out the health of an engine doesn't have to break the bank. And to be honest, the 20 bucks I spent on this tester was well worth it because it just confirmed that this engine does have a major problem. Now, before we figure out what parts we need to buy to fix this engine, we're going to need to put some time into it first. So here's the first hurdle we're going to have to clear, and that is time. It doesn't matter if you have all the funds in the world to replace all the parts you need, but if you don't have the time, well, there's no point in fixing it. That's the biggest issue most will come across when trying to fix anything, whether it be a leaf blower, your car or truck, or something around the house. Do you have the time to invest in it? Now, in this case, I had to take the muffler off to get a better look at the piston, and what we found was that there was minimal damage to the piston and instead what looked like to be a stuck piston ring. Unfortunately, it wasn't a definitive result, which means we'll have to invest even more time to try and figure it out. Now, after quite a bit of work, we finally got down to the piston, and besides the usual carbon buildup, we also see why this engine is low on compression. So for some reason, this style of engine is prone to carbon buildup, specifically around the piston ring. So that's the bad news, but the good news is that if we're really careful, we could possibly get this engine back to working condition. So here comes the big question. Do you take this opportunity to just get it working again, or do you order a new cylinder, piston, and ring to get it back to tip-top shape? Well, that depends on what you're going to do with it. If you're just going to get it running to sell for profit, I wouldn't blame you if you just got it working again. But if you intend on using it for yourself because you need a good leaf blower or it has a lot of sentimental value to you, then maybe you should max out the budget. Now, at this point, depending upon your skill level, this might have taken you 10 minutes or maybe 10 hours to get here. But if you've maxed out the time that you've given yourself to get this job done, then maybe it stops right here. However, if you still have time left, you need to figure out if you want to throw more money at it or maybe some more time. And if you're having a tough time deciding if you want to try and free the piston ring versus just replacing the top part of the engine, I will let you know that you're going to need about $100 to replace the cylinder, piston, and the ring. So as you can see, it's definitely worth the time to try and free the ring and clean off all that carbon on the piston. So why is this even up for debate then? Well, simple. After getting the parts back together, the engine may still not give us enough compression because of wear and tear. Now remember, the route that I'm taking is just to get this engine working again and not to bring it back better than it was before. If I didn't mention it before, this project is not driven by sentimental value. Instead, I intend on getting it working, using it for a while to make sure it's working well, and then selling it. Now, the big problem is that this blower is not worth all that much money, so if I had to spend $100 on it, I'd have to ask an absurd amount of money for it to make any profit on it. Now think about it, whatever you think this blower is worth in your area, try tacking on an extra $100. No one in their right mind is gonna buy it. So as you can see, trying to do this job on the cheap does make sense. However, the time, well, you're never gonna get back. Now the test results after freeing up the piston ring isn't terrible, but it's not great either. However, this reading is more than enough to get this blower started and running, which it wasn't doing before, so I'm going to take it as a win. Now, you can argue that since I knew I was going to eventually sell this blower that I should have replaced some of the parts, and that's your right to do so, but I will remind you that I was always going to be selling a used blower and not a reconditioned one. Now, there are a couple of circumstances where I might have put a couple of bucks into this project. Now, if the second compression reading had been below 100 psi, I might have considered just replacing the piston ring, but the only reason why is because it's really affordable. Now, depending upon the condition of the cylinder wall, this might have made the reading a whole lot better. However, since we got a fair reading to begin with, I decided not to replace it. So as of right now, I probably have about 3 hours into this project, and that's because freeing the piston ring took quite a long time. And that's because if you're not careful doing this repair, you could easily break the ring. Of course, if your time is worth more than the cost of a new piston and ring, then I'd recommend that you just buy it instead. However, where's the fun in doing it that way? Now, I've obviously decided to take the I don't want to spend a dime route, but I still need to figure out if it's going to start and run. Otherwise, I'll need to consider buying some new parts, or worse yet, forgetting about this project altogether. This is where you'll need to consider if the project is worth a huge investment in time, money, or both. And since I decided not to spend any money on this one, it meant that I had to invest way too much time into it, and for some, this may not be an option. So it looks like I made the right choice on this one, and it also seems like the carb is in working condition as well. That means I don't have to put any time or money into servicing it, but I'm not going to get away scot-free. Now, even though I'm a huge penny pincher, doesn't mean I'm not going to do any sort of service to this engine. As you can see, the fuel lines, which don't last very long, especially if you use ethanol gasoline, needs to be replaced as they've already started to change color. Of course, I do have a reason as to why I'm replacing the fuel lines, and that's because it's quick and simple, and better yet, it's cheap insurance. Now, to replace the lines, it could be as little as 10 minutes and longer if you've never done it before. Also, the lines themselves are not that expensive unless you choose to get the expensive ones, which you don't have to. Now, I buy my fuel lines in bulk, meaning I buy them in spools of 25 feet or more. Now, buying it this way makes each foot of line very inexpensive, but buying only what you need still isn't that bad either. That means a foot of fuel line is roughly about $1, and the amount I need for this blower is pretty close to a foot. So at this point, I'm about 3 hours and $1 into this project, which so far looks to be a pretty good investment, just so long as nothing terrible happens later on. And aside from using some carb cleaner that I already had on hand and some elbow grease, this project has been pretty straightforward so far. But what if things didn't go according to plan? Well, that would have obviously made things a little bit more complicated. So first off, how much is this blower worth in your area? And second, how much are you going to spend to get it working again? And if your asking price is going to be a lot more than the typical price, then it may not be worth fixing it then. So what about fixing it for personal use? Well, if it's just as much to buy a used one, then there's really no point in fixing it unless it's just something you really enjoy doing. So have I been in this situation before? And the answer is yes, in fact, more times than I can count. In fact, if you've been paying attention, most of my videos are just like that. It does seem to happen more often with low-value items like string trimmers and older machines though. Oddly enough, most weed eater brand equipment falls into this category unless it's a lawnmower. And as you might have guessed, if I need to buy more than just one component, say a carb, a filter cover, or maybe a blade, the investment in those parts, and don't forget the time you'll need, means by the end of the job, selling it simply isn't worth it. But it can easily happen with mid-range equipment as well, and for the very same reason, time and money. Now, I did a video a couple of years ago on a decent lawnmower, and after replacing multiple components, one of which was the transmission, I just broke even after the sale. That meant my time was not covered and I was basically working for free on it. Now, you don't have to have a business degree to realize that's no way to run a business unless you like claiming a loss each and every year. So if it's not for the money, then why keep doing it? Well, the main reason you should do this is because if someone doesn't do it, then there's a good chance more of these will make it to the landfill instead of getting a second chance. Now, my stance is not based on an environmental aspect, but instead it's more of not wanting to throw away a perfectly good machine just because it needs a bit of work. So yes, it is based around the idea of not being wasteful, but I just find it a bit of a shame to get rid of something that only needs a $10 part. Now, there have been a couple of machines that needed a lot of money to repair them, and of course, for me, that pretty much means they're not going to be repaired at all. So apparently I have more time to give than money, and for good reason, but even I can't fix every part I need. And when that does happen, it means that machine's going to be put on the shelf for who knows how long. Now, most times I'll just keep it until I can find another machine to use for parts, but there's no guarantee when that's going to happen either. Now, as for this one, after a whole lot of work and some adjustments here and there, it seems to be working better than ever. I'll just keep it for a while to use and make sure it'll hold up and then decide on what to do with it. I don't recall if I ended up servicing the carb later on, but even if I had to replace the carb, I'll still end up making money on this one. It's just too bad I ended up putting so much time into this one, but I guess I can sleep better at night knowing that I was able to save another one from the trash. It's just too bad I can't pay my mortgage with warm fuzzy feelings and good intentions, otherwise I'd be rich. So my question is, have you ever spent too much time or money on a project and regretted it later on? I know sometimes you get wrapped up in a repair that by the end you forget about the budget because it happens more often than you think. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.